And we're live again. Thank you so much, dear audience, for joining us for the third episode of BeyondQuality Community Podcast. As usually, we have Maryia, Anupam, me, Vitaly, and now we have our new beautiful guest, Rahul Verma. Hello, Rahul.
There. Thank you for the invitation. It's a joy to join here, and let's see how it unfolds.
Yeah, this time we are discussing a research which is being done by Anupam on the community and everything around this research. The topic of the research is LLMs, RAG, and RAGs. Anupam, can you introduce this research just a bit better?
For sure. I mean, it all started with my getting curious as to how we can test LLMs as a software, right? And I started playing around with, firstly, I did explorative testing of LLMs. I just built, I just uploaded or I just connected an LLM with a data source and then started seeing, how it behaves. And that was an interesting experience. And I shared my initial efforts with Rahul, and the feedback I got from him really got me to go a lot deeper into this. So instead of just taking and getting the default RAG model that ChatGPT gives me from the user interface, I was able to actually take a framework called LangChain and build my own RAG model, and then proceed to test it. And I got to a point where I could at least make some automated evaluations of the performance of this RAG model, and therefore qualify it to some degree, at least on an automated fashion, in addition to explorative testing. So a lot of credit to Rahul and his input here, and maybe I can pass the mic to him to so that he can provide his insights or his experience here.
So thanks, Anupam. See, my own experiments with RAG also stand at what I call rudimentary levels. It's a much deeper subject, and especially within the testing community, I think RAG as a concept is not being fully exploited, right? Uh, and I'm not experimenting, frankly, with established frameworks like LangChain for RAG or Ragas for RAG, because I don't think so. We are at a stage that we should fall into the trap of using tools and frameworks created by others. It's a very early journey of Gen AI, and we as a community, we end up always being users of tools created by others. There are hardly any techniques for testing which are created by testers. There's hardly any testing tool which is created by a tester. So even the core of our profession in terms of tooling, it is created from outside in, because we end up being users of things. We jump to the tool wagon, which is the latest, buzzy thing. Okay, LangChain, LangGraph, Agentic AI, Crew AI, Autogen. So we end up being users, and the problem with that is that the technology continues to evolve. But that evolution happens within tooling, and we continue to remain as basic users. And the problem with that is that we would never understand how to use these tools properly because the basics are not there. Yeah. So with respect to, just as an example, the reason I don't go to frameworks, because all these frameworks would have gaps. If we truly come to these frameworks as a tester, there's a lot of knowledge we carry. There's a body of knowledge which is created over decades. And the RAG is created by AI community. There's a body of knowledge, of course, which they bring to, table. This clubbing can only happen if we behave as testers and then as users. Yeah. So for example, retrieval-augmented generation, it is being treated as a one phrase by the community, and not just by testing community. I see LinkedIn every day. It's just RAG. But there are three parts to it. There's the retrieval part, there's the augmentation part, and there is the generation part. So when it comes to evaluation, you would see how often these three get clubbed rather than being treated as components. The retrieval part has to be tested separately. The augmentation part has to be tested separately, because that is where the prompt engineering comes into play. And the generation is the model's responsibility. That's the third problem. So wherever I see any kind of evaluation going on, it is being evaluated together. Whereas we have this years of work behind us, right? Which says first test the units, then their integration, then do a system level testing. And then finally you start talking of the business scenarios. In which situation this RAG system is going to be used? What's the cost of using it? What is the latency? What are the beyond functional or parafunctional metrics? Parafunctional metrics are not evaluated at all. So there are these gaps which bother me like any other subject. So I always try to sit as a student and sort of study the subject from the very first sentence. So that's the reason I said my experiments are rudimentary. And maybe 1 year from now, 2 year now from now, it would reach a stage where I can gain some form of good knowledge on the subject. Yeah.
I really love what you're saying. I think that in our industry where investors really want to flush money into any project which has Gen AI inside, it is very hard to resist the temptation of adding more tools just because it's hype, it's cool, it's cargo cult as well, like Microsoft does it, some other company does it. Let's just add more and more. And for us, engineers and testers, it is very hard to keep up with the progress because you're fairly saying that we had LLMs, now we have RAG on top, now we have RAGas on top, now we have LangChain, now we have more and more and more tools. And even in the testing community, I don't see a uniform understanding, shared understanding of the limitations of the LLMs itself. I still see posts on LinkedIn how a new version of an LLM will change everything. No, it won't. It is an LLM. We must understand the basics first to be then able to apply our analytical skills to the new tools we have built on top of this basic stuff. And this is why the research that Anupam started is so important to me, because he is explaining it well and democratizing the access and knowledge for these tools.
Yeah. No, but at the same time, I want to add to what both of you, Rahul and Vitaly, spoke about, and specifically with focus on certain points or certain words that you use. Uh, some of the words were, rudimentary and student, right? Like those words really hit home because not just are the frameworks rudimentary because it's a new and upcoming field, but I feel like how we test and the methods we use for testing need to be fundamentally different because it's a different kind of software. Now, I think the bedrock of most of my training and experience as a tester or as a quality engineer has been on consistency. Now, whenever I have met software in the past, I expect software to be consistent. I expect humans to be inconsistent, and that is part of my mental model when it comes to testing. Now, here we have a software where some degree of inconsistency and some degree of fuzziness is built into the design. And that is a feature, not a bug. So far, we've only been treating inconsistency as bugs, or at least as something that is unexpected behavior, right? Um, Therefore, it was actually a very humbling experience when I first opened an LLM from the mindset of not a user, but as a tester. And the first thing that I had difficulty in wrapping my head around is what am I to expect from this? What are my expectations of, and even to write down the expectations were hard because the expectations were fuzzy. It kind of felt similar to evaluating. I mean, first of all, I think when it comes to evaluations that people do of human beings when they are at the end of the year or something, I find that to be very absurd because it's like trying to constrain a human being in a certain box and saying, on basis of this box, we'll give you 4 or 5, 4 on 5, and give you a raise and something like that. Now, in this case, we are working with a machine, so we are justified in putting a box around it. But I think it requires us to go back to first principles to define these constraints and define these standards, right? Like I found that to be a humbling and a very interesting experience. But I would love to also get your views, Vitaly and Maria, on this, right? Like, if you look at LLM as a software, what has your experience been with testing it, or what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, it is really interesting to get this new technology into our technical field, and I have a feeling that it is well. It's much like we've got, for several years ago, automation tools going started, and it was the same, like new thing coming, and then everyone wants to try it, wants to apply it, and then one more shiny tool comes in, and then everyone switches and is creating certifications, trying to get rid of the all of the all frameworks and then implement a new one, and then one more and one more and one more, and then where we end up is that no one can, or a few professionals that could really understand how frameworks work. How do we create frameworks? Why do we need them? Where to start? Why do we need automation at all? And all of this is just being amplified right now because LLMs are basically a new tool that we could use, that we could apply. But if we do it without any preparation, without any thought about how it's working and where we could apply it and why, is is kind of is really, really important right now to understand why do we want to apply these tools. Is there a use case for this? Because I see right now, I see many companies, they just want to implement any AI feature at any cost just because it's a buzzword right now. But that's not the way business works. That's not how quality things work. And I see as my mission right now to create awareness about all the risks, about possibilities, about the basics of how LLMs work. And I focus on the security part. And I just gave a talk on Hostef about this. And I've got so many replies that people don't realize how much it could affect your product if you just integrate a small LLM part in it. So the attack surface becomes much, much bigger because of how LLMs work. And here I see the problem that people need first understand how it works and then apply it in their projects.
I second what Maria is saying. For me, any testing starts with exploration. So when LLMs started emerging, of course, I jumped on the bandwagon and started exploring them. It was really, really interesting. And I spotted hallucinations straight away. It was ChatGPT 3.5. It wasn't good at all. Then I saw ChatGPT 4, now it's 5, and I still see the same type of issues which are unavoidable due to the nature of the prediction system which is inside of an LLM. And what's really curious is to see how many more chatbots on the websites I see. It's exactly what Maria is saying. We're adding tools just to put AI with AI label on our product. And the experience that users have, it gets worse. For me, when I had an old-time chatbot on a website, when I witnessed it, I knew its limitations. It wasn't psychophonic. It wasn't trying to prove itself as a person, as a human being. And I could see, okay, this chatbot has strict limitations. I know that I need to type in operator, please, operator now, and I would get a person, a real one. With LLMs now, it's much harder. But so my point of view is that we as testers and we as engineers need to understand the principle limitations. Then we can think which problems, in which context an LLM can be applied to, or even if we are forced to use an LLM in a certain context, we can then think how to assure risks. Because in my opinion, testing is about risk management. We need to understand, as Maria said, security risks, hallucinations risks, etc., etc. And with the hallucinations, the only way to reduce this risk, as far as I understand, is to use a RAG. And in order for us to be able to reason about if we're using the RAG correctly, we need to evaluate RAG with RAGs and all this stuff. And yes, we're adding more and more complexity. So with every single new addition of a complexity, we should think, is it even worth it? What do you think, Rahul?
So a lot of interesting points touched upon. So, I'll share my viewpoint. First of all, I have also a security engineering background. So the point about attack surface hit home. It is anything which you add to software, and with the kind of complexity we are talking about, complexity is an enemy of security. When you keep things simple, they are simpler to handle and to imagine. But we are dealing with a complex tech, which is mimicking intelligence, which is a generative technology. So there are no fixed paths to it, which you could really sit and think that, okay, we cover this at this point in the attack surface and we are done. So very interesting point there. I would like to add one thing to what you said, Vitaly. So earlier, I also, echoed the same point that we should act as testers when it comes to that technology. There is a problem with that as well. So that's the other side of the story. Because we are testers, we end up not making use of a technology. Our experiments end up being shallow because we keep criticizing it. And that's the other face of our community, which I'm bothered about. While other people are creating hype, we are not going for hype. But in the same pool, you see people doing genuine experiments. They understand LLMs limitations. They are as skeptical as testers. Under those limitations, they are going deeper. RAG was not invented out of thin air. Somebody understood the problem of hallucinations and then invented it, right? Now, the other side of testing community is, and especially I see that problem in the old leadership, self-titled leaders, self-titled experts, that their day's job is to criticize LLM. They are not doing any experiment, any deeper experiments, any shallow thing they pick up, and they're projecting it as if they're doing something, wonderful. Whereas that's a small drop in the ocean. So that is also misleading. If we make it our job to always criticize LLMs while not considering its possibilities, that's also a limitation which blows out of proportion, especially within the testing community. In the past 2 years, I have had enough humbling experience. So, for example, you would see people calling, this out, and helpful people saying this out loud. Treat LLM as intern, as your intern. There is a subtle. This is subtly derogatory to LLM. The moment you are calling these words, right, intern, fresher, new to the testing industry, you are considering yourself superior to it. And the moment you do that, you would never let it perform. Never let it do it better than you. So a partner is a better word. I'm not saying making it superior to you because I believe in humans. I don't trust LLMs at all, right? But when you give that equal partnership opportunity to LLM, it is you are increasing your own responsibility to make good use of it and let it perform. You would not subtly work against the technology which you are planning to use. And that's where deeper experiments happen. That's where you would take it in the direction which you want. And as a last point, last year, one of the first papers which I read about LLMs, there was a beautiful point there, which is also a summary of some of the points which you mentioned. LLMs help those who know the answer. Yeah. So what? So we should not confuse LLMs with knowledge base. It's not knowledge. It's just maths. It's just predictive technology, and its default path is cliches, bad information. The way world works also, the default of the world is foolishness, stupidity, the common taken paths. If we want the LLM to do something special for us, we need to be that special person and raise our quality bar. Then I see LLMs hold your hand. They do wonders. I wrote a book with AI. So it was a humbling experience, what I am on my own and what I could be with an LLM. There's a lot of difference. So it's an enabler, and we should take it in that direction if we want.
And there is a direct anecdote I can share, Rahul, which echoes my experience based on what you said, right? As a user, I have no qualms in admitting that LLMs make me multiple times productive when it comes to certain tasks that I do, right? And this is something that I've experienced and I've seen, like I've, and but on the other hand, when I started approaching it as with a testing mindset, I saw LLMs fall flat with very basic tasks that you expect a software to achieve. Right now, I had this cognitive dissonance and I had to resolve it. Right, like you know, going on one extreme was to say, hey, it can't even do this now. How can I trust it with doing that? But I have this experience where it has done far more complex things than where it failed, right? So you have to be nuanced here. Otherwise, you leave a lot of the benefits on the table. And that speaks a lot to treating it like an intern, right? Like, I think I completely, I hadn't thought as deeply about it as I do now when you mentioned this point, but I completely agree with you that calling or treating LLMs as partners is far more effective, because at the end of the day, an LLM is only going to amplify your base level of effectiveness. So if you are already effective in a field, it can take that and multiply that. But if you are not effective as a professional, and if you are a dilettante in that field, it can actually be quite dangerous, because you're not able to prompt it in a manner that is going to be useful, right? Like,
Yeah.
in terms of, like, adding a little bit of nuance to what you said, I feel like LLMs help those people the best that they know they might not necessarily have the output directly, but they have an idea of what the output should
The
look like.
direction. See, to add to your point, right, to elaborate it further, you expect an intern to make mistakes. You are lenient towards his or her mistakes. That's a very different psychology from letting it be a partner, because partners also make mistakes. You let them make mistakes. So expecting them to make a mistake is a very different psychology from letting an entity do a mistake. This is a very subtle difference. And because then I also do mistakes. And it's not just the LLM amplifying us. We would also end up amplifying the LLM with the technology improvements you are doing, Anupam. RAG is about amplifying LLM. Prompt engineering, context engineering is about us amplifying the LLM. Partnership works both ways. Yeah. So this subtle thought would help us do much better. Yeah, definitely.
I would say that I wouldn't totally agree to humanizing the tool, because partners and mentees and trainees, any person learns. LLMs don't learn. They don't have a learning capacity at all. We have to retrain them. And retraining is not commercially feasible for us, at least for me. It's not commercially feasible. What I fully agree to is that LLMs operate on the medium level of what we have on the internet, what it was trained on. So of course it will make mistakes. And I fully 100% agree that if I know the boundaries of the answer or how to check the answer, then LLMs amplify me a huge deal. And this is where we as testers and engineers, not me personally, but some brilliant engineers created RAG to work with the limitations of the LLMs to actually help us amplify our own work even better.
Yeah, I love the idea of using LLM as an amplifier when you already have something to say, when you know what you want to extract or what you want to achieve. And having pedagogical background, I love that Anupam is doing it in a practical way, like trying to create something new based on LLMs and trying to um, getting to know how it works. And I would love to hear more of your advice, Anupam, how we testers, me like a regular person, how would we, where is it possible to start, and what are the most practical ways of using LLMs and RAG and uh, assessing their quality and different aspects of their functional um, ways.
Sure. So, I mean, I actually will take us back to a conversation I had with Rahul over dinner, and he spoke about, RAG and how I can learn this concept better. He gave me a lot of good pointers, and he reiterated that he was a student, right, at that point. And I told him that now, as a student, he has a junior collaborator, or as a researcher in this field, he has a junior collaborator. And I remember clearly he said, "Don't call yourself junior, because right now this field is very new and we need as much perspective as we can to make sure that we have a good understanding and well-rounded understanding of this field." Now, I'm just going to take his words and I'm going to repeat him here. I think every one of us here might get intimidated by looking at this technology at first, but just, if you just spend a few hours with this technology, you realize that you actually have meaningful things to contribute. And these meaningful contributions can just take the shape of going to a certain LLM or a certain framework, playing around with it and reporting bugs. By reporting one bug, I actually, and this links to what you said, Maria, about security. So I found a security hole that is very common in RAG models, which has to do with how, if you have something in the context that you are uploading to a RAG model, and if you have certain instructions that are present in this context, they can override your original prompt, right? This is known as indirect prompt injection. It could happen just as equally with SQL. When you have some prompt injection that is in place, the only difference is SQL is older technology, and therefore it's more mature in the sense that you can escape this reliably. Whereas with LLMs and prompting, that level of sophistication with escaping it is not present. But what I also want to reiterate is, throughout my engineering career, I wanted to be, at least in some capacity, a contributor to open source. And now I feel like the barrier to do this is far lower, and the impact you can have, because the field is so rudimentary, is also far higher in this respect.
I believe this is very important, that with the advent of LLMs and the introduction of these new technologies into our daily lives, we can contribute much more, and we should contribute much more to things like RAG, to things like your research in particular, Anupam, because who else if not us, right? I mean, there is too much hype, and there is too much, as you, Raul, said, skepticism and negativism as well. Some people just reject LLMs. So it's like there are two parts of the world. One, LLMs for the win, it will replace us all, etc. And another part, LLMs is all bullshit, let's not use it all, it's getting us stupid. But the truth is always somewhere in between. And critically, as you, Raul, said, critically understanding the limitations, adding tools or approaches to navigate those limitations, and then going one way up, democratizing use of these tools and approaches. This is what is beautiful. So I'll just briefly tell you how I started with this research of Anupam. He told me the story. I was like, wow, this is super cool. Okay, how does it work? And I was, so you, Anupam, you're saying that you were a student of Raul, who was a student of this technology. So I was a student of you, Anupam. This was very fun. So I sat down with this framework and this code in Jupyter Notebook that you created and put up on the BeyondQuality repository, I always dreamt of talking to Dr. Deming, but of course he's not alive anymore, sadly. And all I have of him is just his books. So I thought, okay, all my experience asking ChatGPT straight away, what would Deming said for this particular thesis was bad. Like once ChatGPT, and I'm not lying, ChatGPT said Deming would advise installing KPIs. I'm like, no, Deming will never do that. So I knew Deming well enough, because I studied all his works, that ChatGPT output was inconsistent or pure lies or hallucinations. So, okay, I know that ChatGPT cannot be trusted to be a factual source of information. It has to be rechecked. And I see what Anupam is doing with RAG, that I can feed all the Deming books into RAG, and it will work then as a more factually correct source of information of what so I can ask Deming books some questions and it will return me some answers. But then I'm thinking, okay, if I do that, that is okay. I know that RAG works well. But if I give this to my wife, will she be able, not knowing Deming, will she be able to tell that this RAG app actually works well? Is it adding factualness, like truthfulness to the answers or not? So this is where RAGAS starts to play in. So in my understanding now, we have RAG as the source of information for which ChatGPT or any other LLM should query data from. And then for us to be able to verify and assure this process works well, we need RAGAS, where it is so funny for me to understand now, we need experts on the particular topic to create those benchmarks so that RAGAS can actually benchmark the requests and response for RAG. And this is like, some people say AI will replace us. Well, actually, it creates more jobs now for experts to be building those benchmarks. This is so fun.
Yeah. And I think I also, as Rahulji said, we should not be too fixated on using frameworks and plugging them directly into workflows that, for example, deploy into production, which a lot of companies are over enthusiastically doing. At the same time, some of these frameworks offer democratization. And I think that is very, very valuable, right? Like they have good tutorials, they help us get started really fast. There's a caveat that we must make sure that this is the map and not the territory. So, every framework has its limitations, and therefore we must not take too much liberty in interpreting what this framework is telling us. But at the same time, I felt like using some frameworks to just get started gets us started very fast and gets us closer and gets us a deeper understanding of the underlying software. I think that in that sense, they were enablers. But Rahul, I would like to also get your views on how or how other people can get involved in this field. Just like you inspired me, like what is your message to everybody else?
See, what I see is that just like LLMs, and this is my humble request to everybody, to first of all to myself, that RAG is also overhyped now. Okay, so what is the solution to hallucination? The moment people hear the word RAG, they are just doing blind ragging now, right? So that is to be kept in mind, that it's again a hammer and every problem is not a nail problem, right? So do not forget your foundations. Traditional search. See, RAG's purpose is to do semantic search across large corpus. Don't mix that with keyword search. Information you can find with the keyword search, don't make it a RAG problem. Don't make it a sameness problem, a similarity problem. Don't make a deterministic problem a non-deterministic problem, part one. Yeah. Other thing is blind ragging, which I call. All these frameworks, by default, what you do is you chunk your information size. If this is a paper, right? There are infinite ways to fold this paper, to cut this paper into small pieces. Every way is not equal. Every way would not fit you. So this blind chunking, that let's split this PDF into 500 words, That's the default, and you're going for that default. That's not how technology works. That's a starting point. In testing, we have been reading PDF in an informed way. We were respecting top line heading, bottom heading. We might have those readers with us already. Why are we doing blind chunking? Why are we not doing section wise chunking? What is stopping us? Just because a new technology came? So if you have if you know the structure, for example, Dumming's book, right? That book has a chapter-wise, section-wise structure. You know the structure already, right? So structured information is the first part. Try to structure it. Don't feed it unstructured information. If it is unstructured, try to structure it, then do RAG. Yeah. Now, if you take a section, create a chunk or one or more chunks for it, and create the metadata, capture metadata from which page, from which subheading this chunk came. This single step would improve your citations and sources. RAG is correctness with citation. That's all this technology is about. So, correctness part you're checking. The citation part, the effectiveness of this, the answer is in very basics. Those basics come from our own profession. We are information organizers. We are information providers. So theoretically, we should be the best people in the world when it comes to information handling. So we apply. So when I said as a tester, you come to this technology, I don't just mean the skepticism, the critiquing skills, the information organization parts, the oracles part from different fields. Like security has so many beautiful oracles we could bring to them to AI and apply for even for functional side of things, even for performance side. Similarly, performance engineering, UX, the business aspects. So theoretically, I find that a tester should be the best person placed to deal with this technology. But I am sad to see at the same time that on an average, he or she is the worst person today to deal with this technology. And that is the equation I want to be seeing in a better form in the coming years. I believe in my community. I've been a tester all along. I never took a management role also. I believe in our community. I think our community is super helpful, one of the best communities in the world from that perspective. But there is a lot of viewpoints, and with the variety of these conflicting viewpoints, there's an ISO, ISTQB side of worldview, there's an agile worldview, there's a context-driven worldview, and then personal worldviews in which moderate views get killed. Only extreme views get the focus. I am agile, I am context driven, I follow processes. These extreme views, if you belong to these camps, people would listen to you. But if you stand back from these camps and say, just do testing, man, just do good testing. That's what our profession is about. Use LLMs, don't be creating hype, don't fear from them. These are moderate views. They are never fashionable and they would never get fashionable. But what's not fashionable? When you said that earlier there was automation and now there is AI and then there would be next tech, I call it the law of bell bottoms. Bell bottoms come into fashion every decade, but their name changes. Now they call it palazzo, right? 10 years from now, it would fade away. Then again, a new bell bottoms would come that would have a different name. But it's the same cycle which we continue to repeat because whenever there's a problem, we start labeling it. Today, every problem is an AI problem. Every problem. We forget to think that no problem is an AI problem. No problem is an automation problem. No problem is an exploratory problem. Problem is a problem. You have to ask which part of it is an AI problem or not, maybe none. Which part of it is automation problem? Which part of it needs brain, human thinking? So any technology or any human is, capable of solving only a part of the problem, not the full problem. If we consider this coexistence as the final truth, then things would be very easy. We would never see such hype and fear scenarios. But the industry, us put together, we always work against coexistence. We always choose to go for extremes, one or the other kind. That's the sad.
Thank you so much. I would say that I was thinking how to wrap up this episode, but I think you wrapped it so beautifully. I will allow myself to add just a little bit. I think that what you said about dragon splitting was extremely important. And again, this comes back to understanding the principles. And here the principle is even more meta. It is about the epistemology and the theory of information. How do we translate information into knowledge? How do we operate this knowledge? What in those damning books is knowledge and what is information? How do I reason about it? And this is the ultra important task for the tester, to understand the context of the world where your product and business belongs, to understand how your product and business operates within the system, within the bigger system, how its tentacles touch other parts of the world, and how your product should work, and which problems it has. Maybe it is, as you said, it is not a tool problem. Maybe it is a social problem. And understanding people and what you said is extremely important. Not jumping into some camp, because it is very easy to do so. It is very easy, like it is our social nature, unfortunately, to blame others, to say it is them, not I. But we as testers should, I fully agree with you, educate ourselves first and be rational. And the second part, help others. And this is what I love about Anupam. And now I know you, I love about you. And I've known Maryia for ages, I love her too. That we are here to share the knowledge and to improve the world. And I think this wraps up this episode really nicely. I will add the links to Rahul's LinkedIn and to your beautiful book to the show notes of the episode. And I will add the link to Anupam's research. Thank you so much, Rahul, for coming and for sharing your knowledge and passion.
It was
I love this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.